Hello engineers, welcome to another video on low level design. In this video we'll look at the proxy pattern. I hope you're ready. Let's get started. So let's start with the intent. Provide a surrogate or placeholder for another object to control access to it. So the word to focus on here is placeholder. So we are giving a placeholder to another object to control access to it. And why do we want to control access to it? There can be many reasons. So we may want to delay the creation of the object. If it's a very large object and we don't want to consume our memory unnecessarily, we only want to create it when it's really required. That's when we can use a placeholder in between to use that object and create the original object when it's really required. So that is one of the use case. Second use case is when we want to protect something from not being revealed. Let's say we want to protect our own IP address or our own physical address and we don't want to reveal that to the outside world. So we can use a placeholder in between which will take care of all the interactions, and that placeholder will control the access to our main object which is placed somewhere else and it is being protected, right? So those are some of the main purposes of using a proxy, right? So let's look at some examples. So one of the main uses of using proxy is seen in networks where we are doing a protection proxy, where we want to hide our IP address, where we want to hide our main server from the external world. We can use proxy, right? So one of the main uses of using a proxy object is to do protection, right? So this is mainly seen in networks. So where we want to hide our main server and provide a proxy server which will take care of the redirection and handling the responses back to the client and so on, right? That is one of the main uses. Second one is a virtual proxy, which will take care of object creation. For example, if we see a web page being loaded, we can see an image placeholder, right? It is not the exact image that is being loaded at first. And when the page is ready to reveal the image, then the actual image is brought from the server and loaded. So this is also called as lazy loading, right? In this case as well, we can see the usage of proxy because we are using a placeholder in the place of the actual image. And when it's really required to show the image, we will call upon the server and fetch the image, right? So that is virtual proxy. And the third type of example is caching, right? So when we have situations where we want to store the pre-computed results or the results that are required for immediate access, we can use caching. So this is acting like a proxy because we are not actually going to the database and bringing stuff, but we are actually using a cached storage somewhere and using that to bring out quick results. So this is helping us in performance, right? But we are actually not dealing with the original object. That's why this qualifies as a proxy, right? So these are some of the example use cases, and there can be many more examples like this for usage of proxy, right? So now let's see the implementation of the proxy pattern. We'll go to our UML diagrams now. So this is the class diagram for the proxy pattern. So let's have a look. So in the proxy pattern, instead of having the real subject as a class, we will have a common subject as an interface, right? And whatever real subject is doing, the interface will support it. And the real subject will implement the interface and do all the operations. And we will have a proxy subject class which will also implement the same interface and it will also implement the same operations as the real subject. But the catch being, it will also store the real subject in itself and it will control the access, right? Instead of client calling the operation on the real subject, client will call on operation on the proxy subject and proxy subject will call upon the operation on the real subject, right? So what is the benefit of doing this? We have control over when this object should be created or when this object should be operated, and if we can do any other pre-calculation, post-calculation and things like that, right? So for example, in the caching example, here in this operation, we can choose whether we want to go to the caching store or the database store to get our result and return the actual response, right? So that way we can use the proxy subject in place of real subject to do some manipulation here. So let's see the sequence diagram. So like I said, this is a simple implementation. First, we have the client. Instead of talking to the real subject, client will talk to the proxy subject. So client will create a proxy subject instance and then call upon the operation of the proxy subject. The proxy subject will decide when to create the real subject and perform the operations on the real subject as and when required and return the response, right? So the client is unaware of this piece of code or this piece of implementation. This is hidden away from the client, right? So this is the implementation of the proxy pattern. Very simple. So let's have a look at an example use case where we will do lazy loading. So let's say we have an image that we want to display, right? So instead of using a real image as a class, we will have it implement an interface called image, which will have a display method. So our real image class, it will also have a display method, and display method will call upon the load image internal method to get the real image from a file and then pass it along to the display method, right? So this is the actual implementation. But we don't want to use the real image all the time. We want to delay the creation of the real image because we are trying to do lazy loading. So what will we do? We will provide a class for proxy image. So proxy image also implements the image interface. It will also have the display method. And what will it additionally have? It will additionally store the real image as part of its properties. And when we say display, it will call upon the real image object and then call upon the display, right? So here we will control when to create the real image. So if we see this in code, it might be more clear. So let's go to the code now. So I'm in VS Code now and we have the proxy pattern here. So let's see the implementation. First, we have the image interface, which will have just one method, which is display, right? And the real image will implement the display method. And in this method, we can see that it is calling load image from disk, and we are loading image from disk, and we are just displaying the image. Okay. So this is a simple example implementation of a real image, right? This is without proxy. Now let's have a look at the proxy class. So this is image proxy, which is implementing lazy loading. So how will we do that? Image proxy is also implementing the image interface, which is having the display method, which means we need to have the display method also implemented in the image proxy. So we are doing that. Okay. Now what else can we do here? Instead of directly calling real image display, we can do lazy initialization here. First, we will set the real image to null pointer. When we are creating this class, we will set the image to null. So if it is null, then we will create a new image, right? And we will call upon the display of that image. So first time when we need to load this, we can use this pattern. And then next time when we have to display an image, we don't need to recreate the object again. We can directly call upon real image.display because this if condition will fail, and we can simply do the display of the image without having to worry about initialization. So what is the benefit of doing this? We will only create a real image when it's really required, when somebody calls the display method, right? Let's say the real image class is really big and heavy and it is consuming our memory unnecessarily. We don't want to do that. So we only want to create an image when it's really required. So that's when we use this pattern. So whenever somebody calls display an image, only then we will create a new image and call upon the display method, right? That way we are able to do lazy loading. So this is how we can implement image proxy. So let's see the usage. So first we are creating an image proxy. We are not creating the real image. We are doing the image proxy with a file name landscape.jpg. Okay. So at this point, image is not loaded. Only proxy is created, but image is not created. Then we will call image.display. This is when the real image is created, and this will create the image and display it. Okay. And next time when we call image to display, it will already have a loaded image. So we are good to go. We don't need to create the object again. We will just use it, right? So that's how we are able to do lazy loading. So if we run this code, let's see the implementation. So the first time image proxy is created but not loaded. So this is this piece. And the first time we are calling the display method, we are actually creating the real object and then printing the landscape.jpg to our display. And the next time we call display method, we are just using the already created object and using that, right? So no heavy stuff involved here. Once the object is created, we can reuse it, but we need to defer the creation of the object as further as we can in order to preserve our memory, right? So this is one of the usages of the proxy pattern. Okay, so that's all about code implementation of proxy pattern. Now let's see some pros and cons. So far we have covered the intent, the examples, we have seen the UML diagrams and also the code. Let's see some strengths and weaknesses. So one of the strengths of this pattern is we get separation of concerns. So the proxy class is taking care of controlling access to it, and the real subject is taking care of the actual usage, right? And then we get lazy loading because we are able to control the delay of object creation. So we are getting some performance benefits there. And if we are using proxy for security reasons, we can abstract away the real object and control access to it. In that way also, the proxy pattern is very helpful, right? And if we talk about weaknesses, we have increased complexity because instead of dealing with one class, we now have to deal with an extra interface and an extra class, and then do additional method calls to take care of the real object usage, right? And another weakness is it also requires additional memory because we now have an additional proxy class, and that also consumes a little bit of memory, right? So that is something to keep in mind. So those are some of the trade-offs. If you have any other trade-offs, definitely put them in the comment below so that I can learn and everybody can learn. So that's all for this video, guys. I will see you in the next one. Do leave a like if you found this helpful. Do subscribe to the channel if you haven't done already. Thank you so much for watching. I will see you in the next one. Cheers.